Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk to you about the weekend that I had at Legynds Second Dawn. My weekend at Second Dawn was spent as a full-time volunteer. And it was pretty fun. It was totally new to me. I had only ever been a PC. It was my first time NPCing. It was my first time playing a non-human character. It was my first time at a LARP that used hit points, and it was my first LARP that used calls, and so it was really all new to me. And it was also my first LARP that used pretty much almost strictly homemade buffers, and it was really new, and it was like really overwhelming, and let's just say I was totally lost when it came to the combat. And so on many occasions when they asked me to go out and monster, I'm just like, now what'll I be doing? And they'll tell me, I say, that's too complicated for me, I won't remember. And so they gave me like pretty much like I was always really easy to kill because that's all I could remember. And I remember once I was a bear, and it was actually kind of weird, and it was really hard to get into being a bear. And so it was kind of a lame bear, and I feel bad for that. But I couldn't get into the bear because it was just me in my in like my black clothes with like a brown tabard, and I have two buffers, and I'm just like, okay, I have to be a bear. Okay, be a bear, be a bear. And I was like, oh, I can't rawr. I don't like I don't know how to be a bear. It was just real hard to get into being a bear. And also while I was the bear, I was hit by some sort of spell packet that did something that I didn't even know what that was. It wasn't something that I remember being explained to me, and so I just like, yeah, and I drop, and I'm like, you got me. I'm just dead. Because I didn't know what I was hit by, and I don't want to not go down if I probably should have. And so it was real interesting. It was interesting to have like loot and items on me, which I had never experienced before. And it was interesting for players to be able to skin me or take like skin and fur off of me and find loot and ingredients on me. So that was kind of cool. But I thought it was weird that I kind of had to like take it out of my pocket and hand them the loot to them. I couldn't let them take it from like a bag, and I couldn't just drop it on the ground, which I thought would have been okay, but it wasn't. They were like, no, I should hand them the loot, and I'm like, okay. I think my least favorite experience there was the bear tavern experience, just because it was very hard to get into it, you know. But my definitely most favorite experience is a tie between my character Lanessa and an NPC that I played for them. The NPC that I played for them I don't know their lore really, and so it's kind of an avatar for their god, and I was a statue that came to life, and I kind of was like supposed to be just there and talk to them. And so I did, and it was really cool, and the room was full of fog, and there was like really cool ambient music with chanting and stuff on, and so I really was able to get into that, and I got pretty immersed in that up until the point where I disappeared and I had to walk over to the side, where I would still occasionally yell things from nowhere, and they were supposed to still hear my voice. And so it was still cool to not be there, but I was still able to stay in the room and watch this huge, awesome fight. But also that fight was scary because during that fight a weapon broke. But and that's scary. That was definitely awesome because I was able to get immersed, even if it was momentarily. I wanted to tell you guys also about the character Lanessa, and she was a Tuhula, and she's kind of like a type of fae. She didn't have wings, but she had horns and pointy ears, and she wore like fall colors. And she died the first night. It was the first time and the last time that they saw her. And I pretty much refused the help that would save me out of pride, and I kind of cried. I cried a lot. I was able to produce tears for them, and I told them, I said, how should I react to what's happening, they said, oh, it's kind of like burning you from the inside out. I'm like, ah, well, I should probably cry. And they're like, yeah. I was like, maybe I should cry silently. Like I have too much pride for them to hear me cry. And they're like, yeah. And so I get like stung, and I look at him, and they're asking me if I will accept this help. And I'm just like silent, I'm shaking my head. And they're like, are you sure to keep shaking my head? Because I don't want to speak, because I'm like crying. I can't speak. I'm already committed to the crying. It's done. And they asked me one final time, are you sure? And I just say yes. And I turn to an NPC who I know is being played by a friend of mine named Greg, even though there's a mask, and the mask kind of looks like a jack-o'-lantern. I turn to him, and he's the last thing that Vanessa sees before she's dead and she's no more. It was kind of an emotional thing, only because I saw that no one else was sad that I died. I was like, oh, my little fairy friend that I just made, and we held hands the whole way there, and I was like, if anything happens to you, I'll be really upset. And I die right there in front of her, and she's just like, yeah, I'll put my hand in there too, 50-50 chance, yeah. And I'm like, no, you just saw me die, don't do that. And so it's just like, you learned nothing. So that was really funny, because I left the room after I died, and I went out to play, and I stood there and I watched like that module just for a little bit, and then when it was over, I went over and I pretty much got ready for whatever else they needed me to do. And it was just so much fun, and that was the first night, and so it was just awesome. It was great. But why didn't they remember what they said? I pretty much got ready for whatever else they needed me to do. And it was just so much fun, and that was the first night, and so it was just awesome. It was great. But another NPC that I played was just a nameless peasant who was being attacked by these little things that are pretty much tiny little people who are like little cannibals, and they have like huge mustaches, like huge handlebar mustaches, and like big unibrows, like no matter what their gender. And I'm being attacked by them, and I'm supposed to be trapped in a tree, and the marshal there was like, just stand beside that tree or something. I'm like, what about that over there? And there's these two trees that are kind of like this, or they're close enough together that I wedge my cloak in like some leaves and stuff, but then my cloak's on top, and I stand on it, and I'm standing, and I'm like wedged between the two trees, so I'm about 2 feet off the ground, and I didn't climb a tree like they asked me not to. I kind of worked my way around that, and I stood between two trees, and that way I was like 2 feet off the ground, which is a little more believable than me standing beside the tree, for them to imagine that I'm up high in a tree. I felt like I wanted to put forth whatever effort I could in all my costuming, in my roleplay, and in what they asked me to do. For example, like, I made sure all my costuming was 100% okay from head to toe. I tried not to break character, but a lot of people were asking me questions out of play, and I would answer them really quickly, and then I'd like stop talking to them, or if I felt like I was a problem being there because they wanted to ask me tons of out of play questions, I would like politely move to another table at the feast or something, and just allow them to role play amongst themselves, and not be tempted to break character with me and ask me a bunch of questions. I think that was a lot of fun. The damsel in distress thing. And finally, someone with magic had to summon me out of the tree and force me to come to her, because even after they killed the little things trying to eat me, I refused to come down, because I just watched them eat all of my family except for my sister, and so it wasn't cool. Another new thing was, wow, there were almost no humans. I am so used to being surrounded by humans, and there were like 3. there were tons of like cat people, and there were tons of werewolves, and there were a ton of elves, and then there's some things that I thought were humans, they turned out to be dwarves. And so it was really interesting to be like, what are you? Because I didn't know. It was really hard to tell. And there were some things and like, well, geez, I never heard of that. You look pretty cool though. And some people, they looked scary and I didn't want to talk to them, and so I'd be like, no, they're nice, and like, oh, you look scary. And so it was really fun to see a really diverse room full of characters of all different, you know, species and stuff. That was pretty interesting. It was really awesome that they had loads and loads of boxes of costuming, and they had tons of spare buffers, and they had tons of makeup, and they had someone there doing airbrush makeup, and then an awesome girl named Brandy was doing makeup for some people. And I think it's cool that you can go there and they can supply you with costuming if you volunteer for them. So that's my rambling about my experience at Legynds Second Dawn. I had a lot of fun. I would definitely go and volunteer for them for the whole weekend again. I'm not sure if I would go as a player for a weekend, mostly because I don't yet understand the game enough to be a player. I feel like volunteering more, I'll understand their game because it's really complicated for me. But I will definitely be going back for one reason or another, and I think you guys should check them out too. It was a lot of fun. And so I hope you enjoyed hearing about my weekend at Second Dawn.